the consciousness was stimulated by the struggle of the Vietnam War and the mind-blasting Timothy Leary, all of the experiments with LSD, and people were going into new areas in the consciousness of open relationships and free sex and women's rights, and all of those things were bubbling up. So it was a very fertile period.
This was a transitional period in American movie making. Basically, they were discovering that the old genres didn't work all that well or all that consistently.
America had enormous talent in cameramen, in actors, writers, in directors. But what we lacked was a kind of a talent to recognize the talent. And I thought maybe that was our role, that a company that could go out and say, all right, now let's get the maddest creatures we can find on the planet in America. Let's get guys like, and maybe we didn't know their names at that point, Hopper and Fonda and Jack Nicholson and Peter Bogdanovich, and that I thought could enrich our cultural experience, our movie-making experience, enormously. And they turned out to be some really first-rate wackos.
BBS was at the forefront of this sort of movement against the old Hollywood.
At that time, television producers were in their 50s or 60s, and they wore suits and they smoked cigars.
And so they were resistant to anything that smacked of a new way of approaching making movies.
Bob and Bert were entirely different. They were the culture. They were in it. Seeing these two guys, they're not much older than me, and they just essentially did what got them off. And they encouraged that from us in the Monkey Show and in Head. Let's do what gets us off and essentially f*** them.
The contradiction to what I feel is the fact that I am doing this interview is that interviews tend to heap all the credit on oneself. And it's a very kind of egotistical exercise. Well, every time I say I did this or I did that, so many people were involved in the I. Definitely Bert and definitely Steve.
It did create a real change. These movies BBS made, it knocked out this other stuff.
BBS was the freest possible independent film situation that I've ever seen before or since. I mean, we had real freedom there.
What we call the Renaissance in American filmmaking, or the New Wave, or whatever it is, none of it would have happened without BBS. Bob Rafelson was the creative voice, and Bert was the parent figure, the person who would put together the financing and then give you the freedom.
It was just a kind of a laid-back, rebellious kind of feeling, like they were going against Hollywood, against the norm. You can see it in the movies. I mean, none of the movies are conventional by any stretch of the imagination.
Bob and Bert had a company called Rayber Productions. Someone said, well, do we want to do a 90-minute version of the television show? Or do we want to go off and get into some other stranger, weirder, deeper stuff that we've never been able to address on the television show, like anti-war, like social things, like sex, like smoking weed. Bob brought this guy on the set and said, this is Jack, and he's an actor and wants to be a writer. And Jack had done some B movies at the time, I guess, and I want him to get involved in making our movie.
I was almost thinking I was going to be a director rather than an actor, so I'd been writing. And Rafelson and I were talking, and I said, Bob, I can write a movie about anything. He said, yeah, well, could you write a movie for the Monkees? I said, the Monkees? You got to be kidding me, because I didn't really know them. You know, all I knew was as a successful television show about a rock and roll group. And he said, well, you said you could write it about anything. I said, fine. He says, come in tomorrow. That's when I met Bert. So that night I thought up 2 movies. And I go into Bert and I say, well, Bert, I got 1 movie for you. And I didn't know Bert. I didn't know how cool he was. And I said, one of them I can guarantee you will be as big a hit as Hard Day's Night, easy. And with equal certainty, the other one I can guarantee you won't make a nickel. He says, I want the second one. I didn't know where to go with the interview. He blew my mind, the first thing he ever said to me.
Jack and I wrote Head in strange places, I might add, in closets and basements, sometimes under the influence of Timothy Leary's little pills. But during the entire writing of Head, I couldn't take my eyes off him. It wasn't simply how amazing he was in conceptualizing and in writing. It was the way he acted out all the monkey's parts. And if there was an animal, he could act out the animal. A bird, he could tweet like a bird. A snake, he could slither like a snake. It was a phenomenon. I could not stop looking at him. I can't stop looking today.
So Bob and I wrote that together, which was great fun. We've always been great collaborators as writers because we make one another laugh like crazy.
Bob, it's a movie for kids. They're not going to dig it, man. He's got to make a wardrobe change, man. Tell Gene to put my clothes in the trailer. Gene Ashman, get the wardrobe ready.
It's sort of about a rock group that is, in effect, deconstructing itself before your very eyes.
I think Bob, but to a great extent Bert, as we now know, was very, very, politically and socially radical.
If you're part of that group, you look at it as you're a filmmaker. Bert forced me into the editing room. They made a lot of decisions, Bert, Bob, and Steve, that I was unaware about at the time, but they were basically educating me. I'd never been in an editing room before Head.
There's something about Head, something about the sensibility and the way that they, essentially Bob and Jack, captured the spirit of the moment on film.
And we got this great idea. Well, I know what we'll do. I think this was Bert more than me, or maybe both of us, maybe Steve. Let's call the picture Head, and then we'll be able to say, when we open up Easy Rider, which will follow, from the producers who gave you Head. And we thought that was very funny. Unfortunately, nobody saw Head, so that title, although we used it, it didn't turn out to be very useful. And fundamentally, once the director was going to make the movie, actually start shooting the movie, it was his to make. And it was his casting decisions as well. My feeling was, hire the director and he makes the film.
And that's the way they ran the company. It was very much, if the filmmaker has a real passion for it, then they'll go with it. It was very unusual. In my experience since then, I haven't run across anything like that.
Now, of course, I was one of those directors, so I didn't want anybody telling me what to do. And therefore, it felt to me like I ought not to be telling them what to do. Columbia hated the movie. And they really didn't want to distribute the movie. So we took it to Cannes. And in Cannes, the picture did win a substantial prize. And everybody was talking about Easy Rider. And by the time we came back, Columbia had changed its mind. They definitely wanted it. And we had some threatening power about how this was not to happen again. On the third picture, or the fourth picture, or the fifth picture, or the sixth picture. We had the monkeys now, we had Easy Rider, leave us alone. I had said to Jack, someday when I do my next movie, you're going to be in it, you're going to be the star. And he said, no, I can't act anymore, Curly, because all I get is these B movies. I said, well, we're going to change that. He was getting the second and third roles in the motorcycle movies, and I said, we're going to change that. Well, then, all of a sudden, here it comes, we're doing Easy Rider. Jack was not supposed to be in the picture. Somebody else was supposed to be. Bert thought it would be a good idea because Jack might bring some stability to the wackiness of Fonda and Hopper. And I thought, of course, that Jack, as I just said, was an astonishing talent. But on the other hand, I must say, I was a bit resentful that Dennis was going to be directing Jack because I wanted the privilege of being the man who discovered Jack Nicholson.
There was an enormous amount of dissatisfaction in the intellectual and quasi-intellectual communities with the way American life was proceeding. I think a lot of us saw something of ourselves in Jack's dilemma in that movie?
The first meeting I had, I happened to be wearing this crazy purple satin top with all these ruffles and a little bit of whatever, and these crazy flowery pants that Rayette would have loved. Rafelson said, I have to have a meeting with you. So I went to his office, and he said, look, I know you well. I think you might be too smart to play Rayette. And I said, well, tell you what, when you say action, I'll stop thinking.
Listen, I never got to thank y'all for your hospitality. You tell Carl from me, if any of you want to come down to our place anytime, you'd be more than welcome. Bye now.
Bob and I wrote a lot together. We were very close creatively anyway. That's why we could argue about everything. And, you know, we always had these kinds of discussions. All the movies we made together, Postman, one of my favorite movies and all that, we fought like the dickens. But we also ate dinner together every night. He thought he had his fix on me, and he probably did.
The picture's very well written by Carole Eastman, with a real sense of, odd American behavior and pretty good sense of dialogue. Directorially, it plays, I think, to Bob Rafelson's strengths. And one of his strengths is panorama. He really has an ability to step back and put his characters into a larger context. They're kind of sweeping vistas that they move through, and he kind of contrasts, I think, the openness of the American landscape with the closeness of his characters' lives.
What I had said to Jack, and what I felt was really intrinsic to the movie, was that we had to see the underbelly of this character, that he was somebody who had emotion, but that it was all blocked up. And we had talked about his crying, and Jack said that was the most simplistic thing that every director directing his bike movies, he said, well, why don't we have a cry scene here, Jack? And just put a cry for us, And so he was very much opposed to it. But I was very much for seeing the underbelly, and we picked out a few places where it could happen. But in particular, I think I suggested it be with his father. And Jack said, I'm not going to do this, and I don't want to do this. And I had kept him up for the entire weekend, long discussions about why this was important.
God damn it, Jack. We got 3 scenes left. You have to cry in one of them. And I said, Bob, that's just not the way we do it. We're serious.
We got in the car, and he said, I hate this script. Shit, give me a pen, man. And he started to write the scene himself. And I said, I don't care what the words are, as long as I see the emotion. I sent the entire crew away. There was a locked camera. That's very easy. It's a big machine. You stick it there, you flick it, and it goes on. And then there was a boom, like this here. And I held it in my hands, like this. Jack was over there, sitting. I flicked on the camera. I said action. I flicked on the camera, and I held the boom, and I faced the other way. I didn't want Jack to see anybody, just to be with his thoughts. And his father was sitting right over there, the actor. And at the end of it, there was a silence, pause. You done, Jack? Are you done? Are you fucking kidding me? He says, you didn't even see it? You didn't watch it? What are you, out of your mind? I just went there and did something you don't even know whether you got it or not? Well, you. That's it.
That moment in that film, because it hadn't been done, had almost as much impact as Easy Rider did.
And Jack took it to a place that I could never anticipate. He was extraordinary, and I can't look at that scene without cracking up, so I just stay away from it. There are 2 things that cameramen really hate. One is clouds that create kind of an uneven light, and then brightness because the cloud passes and then comes back again, and it gets dark because the exposure is almost impossible to calibrate. It's hot one moment, cold the next moment. And the other thing is the lamps get hot, and moths are attracted to the brightness. Well, I'm a hugely nervous fellow on the first day of shoot. I'm almost every day of shoot, but on the first day of shoot, I'm nervous. And here I had directed Head, but I wasn't really directing actors. It wasn't a naturalistic movie. It was something else. And now I'm going to really kind of like explore my chops with really important actors. And the first scene that we were going to shoot in the movie takes place where Nicholson enters the house and discovers Rayhead is already there. I've staged it, and we're about to say, okay, begin. And a moth is on the set, a huge thing, about half the size of a bat. And it flew into the lamp, and then it ricocheted off that lamp onto another lamp. And everybody on the crew, the gaffers and the prop man, the maker, everybody's taking a turn trying to grab the moth, and get the moth, and get the moth, and everybody's missing, and lamps are tumbling over, and there's a bit of chaos on the set. And I said, gentlemen, please, stop. And I stood up from my director's chair, and I held my hand like so. And the moth flew around the room, and then it just flew into my hand, and I shut my hand. I went over to the screen door, I put the moth outside, and I said, now, gentlemen, let's begin to shoot 5 easy pieces. Well, this kind of pomposity was actually very endearing. Carole Eastman was an extraordinary person. I had met her independently of Jack, but Jack was a great friend. One of the things about BBS is that all the people in these movies all connect to each other. It was like we all were born in the same neighborhood in some sense and knew each other, but didn't always know that I didn't know that Jack was a great friend of Carole's. When I met Carole, I met her through another source, and Carole was brilliant and beautiful. And I had written 2 scripts for 5 easy pieces. I didn't like them. They weren't called 5 easy pieces at the time, but they were about this kind of disaffiliated character. And I took it to Carole with a terrible feeling that I was going to fail, and could she help me? And she read them, and I think she threw both of them in the garbage. But there's one scene that it's very strange, because the one scene is the scene at the luncheon table.
I'd like a plain omelet, no potatoes, tomatoes instead, a cup of coffee, and wheat toast. No substitutions.
That used to happen to me all the time. Still happens to me. I go into restaurants now and I say, I want chicken salad, could I have bacon? No, there's no substitutions. You can't do this and could. And I say, please, for crying out loud, you got the bacon here. And they say, oh, don't be such a wise guy, you know. You saw that movie. You know, I didn't see that movie. I made the motherfucking movie. What are you talking about, you know? And in any event, this was very much a part of me, but it was also very much a part of Jack.
We all hung out in a coffee shop called Poopy's up on the Strip. We were actors, so we'd go in there and sit there all day looking at people. And I came like at the end of the afternoon. I ordered up my coffee, but they've been there 3 or 4 hours. And I'm sipping the coffee, and Mrs. Poopy came over, and she took my coffee away. I mean, I just got there. You people have to get out of here and so forth. And I said, oh, really? And I went like this, and I just cleared the table.
Yes, you all have to leave. I'm not taking any more of your smartness and sarcasm.
You see this sign?
And I said, really, how about that, Mrs. Poopy? This was my cup of coffee.
Carole made a much better scene out of the rudimentary part. I think I wrote the first half of it, and she finished it off with having seen Jack do this once, wipe the table clean.
You want me to hold the chicken, huh?
I want you to hold it between your knees.
Why don't you just hold it between your knees? I know definitely was Carole's.
This certainly is an improvement on the motel and the coffee shop. How could you ever left such a beautiful place, Bobby?
I don't know.
You know, the scene in the cafeteria for The fact that it is well known is completely outside the framework of this movie. That's why it disturbs me, but that the scene has become so well known. Look, you're lucky if any scene becomes well known. I shouldn't complain about it, but it disturbs me a little bit because this scene is very much within it, which is about family and about the intrusion of Karen Black, in a sense, on this family.
Is there any ketchup, Brown?
Oh, for God's sake.
Robert, please, let's not be rude.
It's okay. He didn't mean anything by that.
I don't.
We shot this movie something like 16 weeks after Carole and I met. And she started to write, and I was going up on locations and phoning them into Carole and saying, well, now he's visiting his family, but there's this beautiful ferry there, so maybe he should take a ferry. And then later on, we could use that ferry again somewhere. And Carole would say, okay, I got it, like that. Strangely, she took her name off the picture and used the name Adrienne Joyce. So it reads now, a story by Bob Rafelson and Adrienne Joyce, or Adrienne Joyce, Bob Rafelson, and script by, and it's a brilliant script. There was an ending that Carole had written, and the ending for the picture was that Rayette was riding in a car with Jack, and she starts to play with his face and he kind of pushed her hand away, as I recall, and the car swerved and it went off an embankment and sunk into a river, and eventually the bubbles came up, and then the Karen Black character, Rayette, she came up and she stood looking at the sunken car, and then she just turned and said, "You son of a bitch, Bobby," and then walked down the highway, and that was the end of the movie as Carole had envisioned it. Well, I didn't like that ending, and I didn't like it because I felt that the implication of death at the end of this movie was suicide. That if the character died, that he was somehow or rather committed to self-destruction. And I felt that the character that I was trying to write the movie about should be about a man who was condemned to search for the meaning of his life, and not a very happy search at that, not a Zen search, but the kind of search where you just have to wander from one place to another, and you're never quite content. It's a brilliant script, and I couldn't have made the movie without her. There's no question Five Easy Pieces owes as much to her as it does to me.